Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Founder's Playbook from Lab to Launch. Because, let's be honest, the typical startup advice doesn't work for deep tech founders. You can't just move fast and break things when your product has been developed over a decade of peer-reviewed research. You can't just follow the Silicon Valley playbook when you're navigating intellectual property with the university and trying to find capital for hard tech in a capital-constrained world. So, where do you get the real answers? You get them from someone who's actually done it. Our guest today is Maria Cerezo-Sanchez, founder of Neurobite Technologies. She's lived through the entire lab to launch journey, developing her technology, doing the search for that first true believer, and the challenge of turning complex research into a product that someone will actually pay for. Today, we'll just get the unfiltered truth about the mistakes made, the lessons learned, and the strategies that actually work. So if you're an academic thinking of making the leap, this is the conversation you've been waiting for. Maria, how are you? Great to have you on.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here as well.
Lovely to see you. So you're on a journey, it's a fascinating journey. Before you were the founder of Neurobite, let's just get a little bit of history. You were a researcher?
Yes, I was doing my PhD at the University of Glasgow. And as if doing a PhD is not hard enough, I decided that it would be a great idea to start a company in the final year of my PhD and balance both things at the same time.
Oh my God, I can't do either of those things. You're doing both. So what then thinking about, so just go to the PhD for a sec and then we'll come to the company. We'll do one then the other. When you were researching, what was the core technical problem, the core scientific problem that you were obsessed with in the lab, you were trying to solve?
Well, when I started my PhD, I was part of a European project called Hermes, and we were trying to tackle a big issue within neurotechnology, in particular for epilepsy. So 30% of people that have epilepsy have something called drug-resistant epilepsy. That means that any pharmacological treatment does not work for them, unfortunately. So it leaves them having seizures quite often. And you can imagine what that does that to the quality of life that these people have. So I was part of this project, and for the University of Glasgow, our tasks was to develop different kind of neural implant that would be more flexible and adaptable to pliable neural tissue. So that was where I started with my PhD. I started going to the clean room and learning about micro and nanofabrication of these flexible devices and how do we make them fit inside the brain and how do we validate them, etc.
So you were doing that in your PhD, and you're in your last year and you're into that sort of, you've gone into the clean room, you're using those implants. Now, switch to your company. What's the problem your company's solving?
We would say that what we are trying to solve is an unmet need for better implants for these people. So current implants are made of rigid electronics. That means that if you imagine your brain being a jelly-like structure, the current implants are like a sewing needle being inserted and left into your brain. You can imagine that leaves quite a lot of inflammation. Your brain is not really happy about that. And because of that inflammation, there's scar tissue that's occurring and being generated. And that means essentially that what the implant is trying to do, which is record and stimulate brain activity, cannot do its job because of that scar. So that means then that they need to retrieve the implant and go through another surgery, etc., etc. That is the current need that is not being solved, unfortunately, and what we were trying to achieve with flexible implants.
So it feels like there's a line between those two. You're doing research on implants. You found there's a problem with it as part of your research or as part of what you were doing and trying to do. And you said, well, here's a problem. Maybe we can solve this.
Yes, and I had to sort of reinvent myself during my PhD because when you are part of a European project with a lot of PhD students, that means that each one of you, at the end of the day, because we are each doing our own thesis, we need to find our own thing that we can present to the world that is novel and innovative. So in my case, it wasn't just the flexible implants that we were developing, but I also decided to try out dissolvable implants. So things that you put into your brain, then they can record and stimulate activity and then dissolve once they have done their job. As if, yeah, again, as if doing the flexible part wasn't hard enough, then I decided to go on to dissolvables and add another huge level of complexity to it.
Wow. Okay. So you're in that situation where you've got to do something different from everybody else. So you go from needles, which is a
Yep.
scary thought, to flexible to dissolvable, all in that PhD.
Yep.
You're doing all this thinking. When was the point where you thought, this might not just be a PhD, this might be something else?
I think that happens like many other PhD students. When you get into the final stage of your PhD, you enter this sort of crisis mode of what do I do with my life after the PhD? And I did a lot of thinking and I had a lot of conversations with people from inside academia and outside of academia, just trying to find my path. And I decided that I really wanted this technology to reach patients and clinicians that need it. But I was a bit tired with some of the academic aspects of it. So having to, again, reinvent yourself every time you have to write a research grant rather than focusing on the one thing that you want to do, or not having the resources available to be able to do it, or just focusing on publications and citations. And after consulting with my PhD supervisor, he was the one that encouraged me to apply for an accelerator program that was specifically for neurotechnologies, see if I like it. And I loved it and decided to take the plunge, establish a company, and see where that takes me.
Boom. Okay, so push and a pull. I've decided, I've done a PhD. I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. I'm not feeling it. I don't want to do that chasing of citations and chasing grants.
Yeah.
Try something else. What was it about the accelerator that made you think, oh, this is cool? I like this.
I think it was the fact that it was completely different to anything I had ever done before. So you weren't thinking about what is the most novel, the most innovative. It's you were trying to peel back layers, sort of like getting to the core of the onion and essentially trying to see what is good enough so that it can reach a patient. Like, what is your MVP, your minimum viable product? Whereas in academia, you don't think like that. You're always thinking about how many layers can you add to the onion rather than peeling it back.
Oh, that's a lovely way of thinking about it. So there was a whole, what have I got to do to make a difference versus how new can I make this?
Yes,
Practical versus new stuff. Very different mindset.
exactly. Very, very different mindset. And also just being more pragmatic, being more realistic, thinking also about how do you get this to market? It's a very heavily regulated market. And it's something that researchers don't really think about on a day to day basis when they're implementing and researching about solutions, which might essentially just kill any product or service. But that is something that you have to have first and foremost on your mind when you are in the commercialization realm.
Right. So you've got different things to think about as well. If it never gets applied, the regulation almost doesn't matter. It's just an idea that somebody
Yes,
else can draw upon. But if you've got to apply it, you've got to go through the regs.
exactly.
Okay.
And
Well,
how it changes depending on where you're based, depending on the countries, the regions, etc. It's a whole different landscape and a whole other planet, in my opinion.
so you've moved into a different world, different
Yep.
mindset. Translating academic work into a startup is quite a leap, though. So what was that? I mean, you've sort of talked about the push and the pull. What was that tipping point that made you decide to actually leave that relative safety of academia? It is relative, and become an entrepreneur.
I think that's the key point, that it's relative, because when you think about academia after a PhD, you don't really have a secure job. You're always on the lookout for 2-year contracts at the most. And again, just trying to reinvent yourself and potentially having to move not just from another to another town or city, but to different countries, because that is what the environment has set you up to do. So for me, I didn't see it as risky as other people might have thought, because staying in academia was just as risky. I
Mm.
think it felt more risky to me when I started hiring people. That's when I first felt it personally. When it was just me, myself, and I, then I'm like, okay, I'm at a stage in my life where I can take risks because I'm in a fortunate position when I don't have anyone depending on me financially. So that means that right now, if I want to take the plunge and try different things, it's the right time because I can support myself and I don't have anyone depending on me.
So it's something about the timing as well. It's just the right time to
Yeah.
try this. It might not be in 10 years' time, but it's the right time now.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Cool. Really nice. So, yeah, and you spoke about having a conversation with, I think it was your supervisor, about
Hmm.
looking at this and going to an accelerator. What did they say to make you think that way, make you try it?
I remember we had a couple of conversations where he was just asking me what were my plans for after graduation, if I had thought about postdoc positions or industry positions, etc. And I had told him that entrepreneurship was something that I had always had in the back of my mind. And this was even before I went to university. This was just something that I had a curiosity in, let's say.
Mm.
And he remembered that I had said that sometimes during my PhD. So when he got this email from Innovate UK about the accelerator program, he said, "Why don't you try it out? Let's see how it goes." And yeah, that's how it came about. I just went into it not thinking too much about it. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, to be honest.
Okay, interesting. So there was something from even when you were younger then that made you think maybe I want to start a business one day.
Yes. So then when I did the accelerator and realized that I could actually do both, I found my new passion.
Nice, nice. Combining all the things you like. Ah, very nice.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so you had that conversation outside of university. Who was the person that said, "Yeah, go for it"?
I would say my partner. My partner has always been very much like go with the flow, let's see where life takes you. Don't miss out on opportunities that you might later regret not taking. Yeah, again, my family as well, they were very supportive, especially my mom. My mom has also been a businesswoman, and on her side, like she also was part of a startup once, and it didn't go the way she wanted because 2008 happened, unfortunately. So that's a whole story. But she never told me not to do it. She said, right now, you're in a fortunate position where you can take those risks. If you think you want to take those risks, go for it. Why not? Don't regret it.
Lovely. And that support of family is so important because you're doing something that's going to be quite demanding.
That's an understatement, but yes.
Let's go to the technology for a moment then, and we'll build through into the business. So, hard tech, as we call it, is it's
Mhm.
hard for even if it dissolves, it's still hard tech. It's hard for a reason. What was the single biggest technical hurdle you had to overcome to prove that this was an actual thing that could be used in the world? It was a viable product and not just a science project.
Well, back when I started the PhD, we were very much focused on the clean room side of things, on the engineering and microfabrication. But because we were based at the electronics and nanoscale department within the engineering school at the University of Glasgow, we didn't have any capabilities for biological testing. That was a huge leap where I went to my supervisor and I said, if I find the means, will you allow me to set up a biological testing facility so that we can test if these can be implantable? So the very basic is biocompatibility testing, where you culture cells in a petri dish and see if you put your implant in there, do you kill the cells or not? And it was a very good result because we did not kill the cells, in fact. They were very happy and alive. But that was the very first technological hurdle that we needed to overcome to see, is it not just functional, but does it work in an environment like the brain?
So that's the big barrier. I can be an engineer all my life, but unless I put this into somebody, it doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
So I've got to
Or
be
if
able.
it does, because you could use any materials to do these recording and stimulation in the brain outside of the brain. But as soon as you put them in, you're dealing with an entire ecosystem and environment that essentially wants that implant out. So how do you deal with that whilst getting the recordings and stimulation that you want? So yeah, that's the biggest technological hurdle.
So you're going out of your comfort zone. I need to play with biology now. I'm an engineer over here, but now I need to play with squishy things and see what happens.
Well, I was happy to do that because like my degree is in biomedical engineering. So I got sort of the best of both worlds in my opinion, but in my lab no one was doing biology or anything close to it. It was all about PCBs and software engineering and coding and just soldering stations. Whereas I came in one lab meeting and said, "Hey, I want to play with cells. Does anyone else want to play with them?" And I just got very blank stares back of like, how on earth are we going to do that?
Interesting.
So,
Really.
yeah, setting up the facilities and finding the right people to do it.
Okay. Well, let's talk then about, because this was your PhD, let's talk about intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's obviously critical for a hard tech spin out, university spin out. What was your strategy? Because this stuff you've come up with when you're doing a PhD, which is one thing, right? But then if you move to a postdoc or if you move to being a company, it's another thing again. So what was your IP strategy?
Well, at the University of Glasgow, when you are a student, you own your IP so long as you have not assigned it to the university or an external funder. So, for example, we do have PhD students that are doing a collaboration or an industrial PhD with a partner that's a big company, and in their contract, it will say your IP belongs to us. In my case, because I was fully supported by a college or a university scholarship, that meant that my IP was my own. But it all depends on who are the co inventors in the patent. So if your supervisor or co supervisor or anyone else that's a staff member is co inventor in the patent, that means that the university is co inventor in the patent. And trying to navigate that is quite tricky. Just to give you an idea, it's taken us almost 2 years of negotiations with the university to get an agreement that everybody's happy with. But most of the times, what the university wants is a license agreement of sorts. So they will license the IP to the company, and then you will either get an assignation after X amount of years or after X amount of investment has been raised, and you pay back the patent fees through the company, and that's it.
So what a lot of people don't really realize when they're going through this process, you've got to think about this stuff really early. Or you end
Very
up
early.
right at the beginning. Otherwise, you end up all of a sudden, now I've got 2 years of negotiation to have, which is not easy.
It's not easy, and also you have to realize that in the UK currently, you cannot patent anything that you've published already. That is a very big thing on your IP strategy, and most of the times you don't even think about because you hadn't even contemplated the idea of starting a company or a business, and you've already published all of these works, and you go to an IP attorney, and the IP attorney will say, well, this is now considered prior art. Doesn't matter if it's your own. It's like back in university, it's called self-plagiarism. It's the exact same thing. So you have to be very careful and find a way around it. In the US, I know that it's different because they get, I think, around 6 months where you can publish, and then you have 6 months to patent it, or at least file a patent.
So that's something that hits you, university researchers, a lot, because the moment you've written about it, 6 months or straight away, it's gone. It's not yours anymore. And
Yeah.
yet you're told in university, because that's your career, publish, publish, publish.
Yes. It's a very different mindset. And again, because I knew that my path was not going to be in academia, I was happy with, for example, my thesis is completely under embargo. I stopped publications completely because, again, of the patenting. But I can understand if you're a bit insecure and not entirely convinced that you're going to go into a business or a company formation. It's very daunting, because then when you apply for jobs as a postdoc or in academia, you need publications. It's the first thing that they look at when they look at your CV is how much have you published, what have you accomplished in academia.
So you've done your PhD. You've had negotiations about that whole IP piece and who's the co-inventor and how that works. You've spoken to your supervisor and they said, look, this is a good idea for you. You've tried the accelerator. So you're now thinking, right, I'm doing this. Who was the first person outside of the university that you sort of pitched this idea to, or you tried it on with? Who was the first person that you said, like, I've got this dissolvable brain thing? What was their reaction, and what did you learn from that conversation?
Well, I think it was the first ones were the people at the accelerator program, because they were completely outside of my university, my research group. It was people that had already started companies. So it was me and one other guy from Cambridge that hadn't started a company. We were just thinking about the prospect. And it was through pitching to them and the trainers and facilitators of the program that I was realizing more and more, hey, there is a huge opportunity in this space. Why don't I just give it a go? And then through more trainings, I did more accelerator programs. It solidified my belief that this was something that needed to be done. And also talking to patients and clinicians. When you're an engineer, you tend to be a bit more reserved or not reaching out to potential customers or end users as much, because you think, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm for sure it's going to work. But actually, when we started speaking to neurosurgeons and patients with epilepsy and stroke, is where we found this huge gap and this huge need that was not being met. So I would drop off my things and just go to, say, for example, Newcastle, where we had a collaborator in the NHS. And I just asked, hey, can I follow you for a day? Hey, can I attend the neurosurgery? Like, just as an observer. That changed my perspective a lot and changed how I thought of our technology and how it could be beneficial.
That's interesting. So a couple of things there. One is when you were with the accelerators and something when you were working through it and something said there's something here. And the second thing is then following people. So let me hit the first one. What was it when you were doing those accelerators that made you think there's something here?
When I looked at it from a business perspective rather than an academic perspective, when I started looking at the other competitors in the field, the market analysis and traction, and I saw how big the neurotechnology market is becoming. You see the likes of Neuralink, everybody has heard of it because of Elon Musk. These are huge companies. There's a lot being invested into this sector. So that's the first thing that pops into your mind of, okay, if all of these people are investing here, there must be something in there, right? There must be an opportunity that's untapped. So that was the first thing on the accelerators, just looking at it from a completely different perspective.
So there's something about other people doing it. This must be interesting. And then when you were walking around talking to patients, there's that other thing that says, well, there's a need.
Yes. I think that also changes your perspective a lot, because you, again, from an engineer's mind and an academic mind, we tend to start our research, and you can go to papers and see that the first sentence will always be, these many people have this condition in the world. This thing that I've made is revolutionary because of this, this, and this. But they've never spoken to someone with that condition. They have just gotten it out of statistics that are online. The moment that you speak to someone that has a stroke, epilepsy, or that their caregivers or someone in their family or close relatives have had one, you see the personal and human impact of these conditions and the treatments that are currently available. And that is where you get this flame inside of you of like, okay, I have the means because I've been going through, I don't know how many years of education at this point. I've got the resources. Why don't we do something about it?
Wow. So there's a market, but there's also a need.
Yes.
And both of those things are pulling you through and saying this is worth doing.
Exactly. And for me, neurotech has always been a very big passion of mine. So as a personal anecdote, my grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's for over 11 years. So I know firsthand the toll that a neurological condition can have, not just on the person itself, but on their family. And if I went to any public setting and I asked people, if you know someone that has had a stroke, I mean, there's one stroke every 3 seconds all over the world, just to give you an idea. It's very, very common. So it's something that surrounds us. It's all over in our society, and we're just trying to find ways to help more and more people.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So you want to do something. There's the need, there's the history, and there's the market. How did you build your first minimal viable products? By which I mean something that you could at least demonstrate, something you could show. Now, I know you're in a medical product, right? So this is not an MVP that someone from Silicon Valley would think and say, well, I can just publish this next week and everybody will
Yeah.
use it. It doesn't work the same way.
It doesn't.
So talk to us about how it doesn't work the same way and what you did.
Yeah, so for us, an MVP is something that can be validated in a relevant environment. Now, what do we mean by relevant environment? It will be defined in different ways for different types of medical devices. So if you have a medical device that's called a wearable, so essentially you just wear it, it's not implanted inside of you in any way, that can be quite easily demonstrated. I mean, you can go to many trade fairs and conferences and you will see wearables, imagine like an Apple Watch of sorts, and they'll be like, oh, this can monitor your blood pressure or your oxygen levels, etc. That is the easiest way of thinking about an MVP. Now, when you have an implantable medical device, it gets very tricky because we cannot take someone, so submit them to a neurosurgery in front of I don't know how many people and say, hey, look, this works. We cannot do that. It's not ethical nor logical to do that. So the way we do it is called benchtop and in vitro testing, as well as in vivo testing. In vitro testing is literally means in a glass, in vitro, and is what we use the cells for. So we use the cells that are present in your brain and we culture them in a petri dish and see, hey, if we have neurons, are we killing them? Are we able to record their activity? Are we able to stimulate their activity? So that is the first step of validation that we do. And then we go on to in vivo testing, where we do take animals, different animal models that are the closest to human brains, and test them in that situation. Now, there's obviously a very big debate about animal testing, and I hope that one day there's a world where we can test before we go into humans in a model that's perfect, that replicates the human brain without the use of animals. But right now, because of regulations, that means that we have to test in animals. And what we do is minimize that amount as much as possible, treat animals with the respect that they're entitled to, and just be very, very thankful that we can validate them using these models. And then you go into clinical trials. So what would be considered an MVP in other sectors, in the implantable medical devices, is a very, very tricky definition as to what is minimum enough.
Yeah, because you can't. Yeah, like you say, I mean, for example, even that middle stage, which we all know, ideally, if you could get rid of it, you would, but you can't at the moment. Is that animal testing?
We're not allowed to, yes. So in no regulated authority right now with the type of device, again, because we're talking about a brain implantable device, then brain is one of the main, if not the main organ in your body alongside the heart, kidneys, etc., you are not legally allowed to put something into the brain of a human if it's not been tested in an animal first.
And so therefore that minimum viable product has actually got to be really well developed so that it doesn't cause unnecessary discomfort, pain, whatever
Yes.
it is, all of that, all the way through the process, even before you hit a human, let alone when you do hit a human.
Oh, by the time you hit an animal, the design has got to be frozen. You need to validate it extensively and making sure that, again, that the animal is comfortable, that they are in no pain whatsoever. All of these things, they take place much, much earlier than anyone would think.
So very different concept, very different concept. So how did you get it done? I mean, was it university research grants or how did you get it done?
Mostly the MVP was done throughout my PhD. So again, I was funded through the university and the resources that we had available. So that was the first part. And then when I started the company, we got our first research grant from Innovate UK. So it was a small biomedical catalyst award. And that allowed us to push what we call the technology readiness level further up.
University, being a PhD, then Innovate UK, we're lucky here in the UK, we've got a pretty generous grant system for science. They're pretty good. So they gave you the grant. When you were thinking about that, when you're building it and you're thinking about this MVP, you also talked earlier about, talking to patients, physicians around. So you've got something you're building and you're getting information from patients and you're getting information from physicians. Who have you identified or how have you identified who might be the first customer for something that you build?
By speaking to people. That is the first and foremost. So with the grants that we've gotten, I've not only looked at the UK, but I've gone to the US as well. I've gone to Boston, I've gone to New York City, and I've gone to many, many different hospitals just to try to get meetings with neurosurgeons to see what their thoughts are on the technology and how do they think it fits into the care that's already available for patients there, because it's a very different system than the UK. So trying to understand the difference between the systems and how do you fit in an already pretty well defined clinical environment, it's crucial. So that's the first thing that you need to understand. So by talking to as many people as possible.
Right, and you talked about that before as well, the different regulation in different countries and different regions, and what you've
Yes.
got to fit into. So that sounds like another strategic thing to think about. It's like, we Europe? Are we America? Are we the UK? Where are we going?
Yeah, I think the first thing to note is, well, have a look at the markets, the size of the markets, and the amount of people that suffer these conditions worldwide. That will help you determine where should you go first. That doesn't mean that there's a direct correlation between size of market and entry point. But for us, the point of least resistance was the one that determined where we were going to enter first. What do I mean by that is, from a regulatory perspective, where is it that we can enter first with less amount of money? So currently, UK, because of Brexit, it's going through an entire revamp of the medical device regulations, which to this year, we still don't quite sure how that's going to pan out. So that already tells us maybe UK first is not the way to go. Then you've got CE marking in the EU, which is heavily, heavily regulated to the point where they're doing another revamp this year to try and cut back on regulations. That, in essence, leaves you with the US. So the US, with the FDA breakthrough program, has got pretty solid reputation. Obviously, if you see any medical device that says FDA approved, you're pretty solid. You know what you're doing, and other countries will trust the data and the device. But obviously, you just have to keep an eye out on the different regulation landscapes, on policy, on geopolitics, unfortunately. So geopolitics is something that I never thought I would have to keep an eye out on, but it's first and foremost because if you start getting hit by tariffs or by restrictions in immigration, then that is a big, big issue that you have to have a strategy for.
Yeah, I don't think any of us thought we'd have to be so aware of geopolitics as we now are, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a big strategic issue, right? There you're sitting in a lab thinking, oh, I can do this dissolvable thing. And all of a sudden, you've got to work out the different regulation and political policies of two continents and a little foggy island off the coast of one of them and work out where to go next.
Yep,
It's a whole different world.
essentially.
It's a whole different world.
You don't have to do this all by yourself. Like, as soon as you have some funding, start building out your team and also get external help. There are people that are experts in what they do. And for this particular assessment, I did get external help because you need to realize that you're not the most knowledgeable in the room. And you need to realize that sooner rather than later. If you are making a company and you are the most intelligent person in the room, I think you're doing it the wrong way, because you need to surround yourself with even more intelligent people that can push the technology forwards even further than you could have imagined.
Nice. Really nice. Yeah, absolutely lovely. And getting all that talent and capability around you, because it's a big, complicated thing. We've already gone from technology to following people around, to talking to different sorts of organizations, to geopolitics, and then to IP. You can't do it on your own. It's impossible. It's too much.
No, it's impossible. I don't know how sole traders do it, but I am not one. So
yeah, no, it's a massive job. So really interesting and really important for people to hear. Don't try and do it on your own. Get the help. Get the help.
Yes.
Okay.
If you don't ask, you don't get. So
talking about all of that stuff happening, how have you funded the company thus far? So far, you've had a grant from Innovate UK. You've been a PhD student. You're a medtech. And so we've already talked about, well, you've got to do in vitro and then in vivo and all of this development before you can get it anywhere near a customer, a patient, whatever it is.
Yeah.
How have you funded it so far, and what's the outlook on that?
So far, we've been fully funded through grants. So we've gotten just under £1 million in grant funding in the past 2 years since we were established. And that has taken us very far. And we've gone from a team of just myself, again, me, myself, and I, to a team of 4 employees, including myself, and 2 advisors. So it's grown significantly, and we've advanced the technology readiness level substantially. Obviously, grants can only take you so far because they're related to a specific project. And that is the reason why this year, actually 2026, is where we're doing our first private raise.
Exciting.
Which is very exciting, very daunting, but I'm taking the time to prepare for it to make sure that we hit the target that we want.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, well done you. So you've got grants all the way up till now, and then now you've got to go, right, now I need some money to push this on.
Exactly.
Really exciting. Really exciting. When do you want to do that? When do you want to do the round?
By the end of 2026. So I want to spend the first 6 months of the year. So just to give a bit of context, nowadays it takes around 6 months to close a deal and get the money in the bank, essentially. So because of the current projects that we have in terms of grants, we are okay at the level that we're at. We cannot hire anyone else, but we are okay. We're stable. We've got an okay runway, let's say. We're not going to run out of money to pay people, essentially. But that means that we're also a bit stagnant. So we cannot accelerate and we cannot do everything that we would like to do to push the technology forward. So first 6 months of the year, I'm just going to be preparing and talking to investors and setting up meetings and perfecting my pitch deck and all of my data room. And the following 6 months of the year, what I want is to spend 6 months closing a deal. And people will be like, oh, that's crazy. There's 6 months to close a deal. If you're bringing in, I don't know how many investors, angel syndicates, VCs, that term sheet is going to change so much and is going to have so many iterations. You will probably go crazy by the end of it. So I'd rather give myself 6 months to do it than having to rush in doing it in 1 month, which nowadays it's quite impossible in the UK.
I mean, there's a lot you've just said there that's really, really important. You've talked about 6 months of getting ready. You talked
Yep.
about talking to investors in that 6 months. So you're not going to just
Mhm.
explode onto the investor scene. You're going to learn as you go.
Yes.
You've talked about angel syndicates, VCs, lots of people, lots of changes to the term sheet. You're
Yes.
probably going to have, it's going to be more than one investor, almost certainly, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, most, if not all, of the deals that are getting done these days are done by a consortium of different investors and different types of investors, and just pulling together that the amount that you're requiring.
So there's so much there for people to understand. It's a year's job. You've got to do the prep. You've got to give it enough time to do it. Really, really
Yep.
useful. And if anything, even more with medtech, because it's quite high risk. You're very, very, medtech by definition is going to be very early when you need the money. So it's going to be high
Yes.
risk.
It is high risk, high reward. It's very difficult. You have to find very specialized investors that know the landscape inside and out to be able to navigate the regulatory landscape, etc. So yes, right now the 6 months of preparation doesn't sound too crazy to me, in the sense of you need to find the right people to talk to. So out of 200 people that you talk to, maybe 10 will be the right people for you. And then out of 10, maybe 3 will want to do the deal. So it's finding the people, the right timing as well. So just keeping an eye out on news. If you see that a VC has just raised and are looking for investment opportunities, then you know who to target. And also, again, establishing a network of contacts so that they can do warm introductions works much, much better than just cold emailing anyone.
Yeah, really, really. Cold introductions are very hard work. Very hard
It's
work.
very hard. And just in general, people that go into their first raise, they need to realize fundraising is a full-time job, and you need to dedicate all of your time to it. Having 1,000 meetings is not even an exaggeration, is what awaits you for the next, I don't know how many months.
Well,
And
that
you have
brings
to
us.
be prepared for it.
Oh, and that brings us back to your team, because you've said
Yes.
now you've got something like 4 people working with you and a couple of advisors as well. So who have you got on your team right now? Because while you're doing that, they've got to do the rest of the stuff.
Yes, essentially. So I've essentially dumped all my technical and research responsibilities to my wonderful team. So I've got 3 people working with me, Angel, Daniel, and Ali, who are wonderful, wonderful team members. Angel is our CTO. He is the one that manages everything and anything technology wise. We've got Daniel, who's a medical doctor, and he is doing all the clinical and preclinical validations as well as regulatory stuff, which happened completely by chance. He just came to me one day and said, "Would you mind if I did all of the regulatory prep work and filings?" I'm like, "You want to?" He said,
Christmas
"Yes,
come
I
early.
love report and reading." I'm like,
Oh my God.
"Okay, well, if you insist." And then Ali is our biomedical and my materials engineer. So he is the one that's actually fabricating the devices. On top of that, we've got 2 wonderful advisors. So one of them is my co-founder and a strategy advisor. He was my PhD supervisor and has done quite a few spin outs now. So he knows what he's doing. He's doing well on that realm actually now. And yeah, now we've found a way to move from a PhD supervisor and student relationship to co-founder relationship and how that works, which is again another very big topic. And also a neurosurgeon as an advisor, as a clinical advisor. So yeah, it's a wonderful team, and we're hoping to expand it with this investment round that we do.
Wonderful. Well, it's interesting you touch on that. Co-founders are important because, as we said, nobody can do it on their own.
Yes.
But also, it's very common for someone coming through university to end up with a supervisor
Mm-hmm.
as a co-founder, and that switch of relationship can be tricky. There's usually an age
It
gap.
can
There's
be.
certainly an experience gap. There's certainly you're working from a hierarchical basis in university. How
Yes.
did you find that?
It was tricky. I'm not going to lie. I think most people will find themselves in the same position where you're essentially going from, like you said, a hierarchical position where your supervisor is above you to somewhere where you're level with each other. So how do you change that dynamic? And I think for us, what worked best was very clear and honest communication. And that also meant very uncomfortable discussions and talks that we had to have, where we did not agree on terms, where we essentially said we did not like what the other was saying, but having that path of communication, and at the end of the day, giving each other some space to think and work around our own personal decisions, that helped a lot. And it meant that when we reconvened, we could find that we actually had more points in common than in disagreement.
Oh, nice.
And focusing on the things that you share rather than on the things that you don't is a very, very powerful start for negotiations
Really nice.
and
Like
and managing that relationship.
really nice. Really, really nice. What do we share? How do we make this work together? Very nice.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, you both have the same goal, which is to make the company a success.
Hmm.
Now, how you get to that might be different opinions and different ways. But if you have that shared common goal, then just start working from there backwards and see where you can compromise and where you can agree. And making sure that at the end of the day, if you're not 100% happy, then you've got a common agreement that everyone is at least happy. You need to have a clear communication link. You are going to have 1,000, if not more, uncomfortable conversations, and you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It is what it is at the end of the day, and especially if you decide to go and be the CEO, your main role is not just fundraising, but it's also managing people. And how do you manage people? You are focusing a lot on conflict resolution and how do you deal with conflict, with you as part of the conflict and you outside of the conflict. You need to learn that sooner rather than later. And again, just remind yourself that you're speaking to humans, you're not speaking to metrics or robots.
Yes. Lovely stuff. Thank you.
I think a lot of people tend to focus a lot on KPIs and things like that, of like, oh, you've not achieved all of these things that you said you were going to do. But, take a step back and think from a personal perspective, what things didn't work out that didn't allow that person to complete their goals, and how do you improve so that they can achieve their goals, because everyone wants to do that, to achieve their own goals and KPI. As a CEO is essentially a facilitator. How do you facilitate people's lives and work environment?
Really nice. Really nice. Wow. So we've been all the way from in the lab through this, all the way to this year where you're hopefully going to be raising some money from venture capitalists and angels. We've been from being a student to being a co-founder with one of your supervisors. We've been an incredible journey over the last few years. Looking back at that entire phase and that entire journey over the last few years, is there a decision that you could, if you could, you would go back and change?
No, I tried, in all honesty, I try to see everything that has happened in my life as a lesson. It's, at the end of the day, life is too short to be overthinking about past choices.
So then, I mean, as you know, part of the thesis behind this podcast is that there's a Silicon Valley playbook. It's very software based. What have you learned going through that journey that maybe isn't in that playbook, that is maybe counterintuitive or would help somebody go along a similar path that you have trod?
I think one of the things is you don't have to fit in to the stereotypical co-founder CEO role. I think one thing that we see come out of Silicon Valley are very stereotypical CEOs that, or people that then go on to raise millions and millions and write books about it and how I did it and this and that. And then you see other very, very successful CEOs that do not fit those characteristics and that sort of super outspoken, doesn't care what you think, but it's just going to push you until the end personality. I don't think there's a need to fit that. I don't think you have to be mean to be a CEO. I think you can lead by example rather than by brute force. There's many things that you can achieve that doesn't have to fit into that playbook. So essentially, there's no need for a playbook. Just do what fits you and your personality and your ethos.
Lovely. Yes, because there are some very strong examples out there of different types, right? Different types of leader. But you've got to be
Exactly.
right. You've got to be
And
right.
only you can define what leadership looks like for you. There's no point in trying to fit into this very specific mold.
Very nice. Very nice. And so then, given the journey you've been on, you've been to various accelerators, you're now building this company, looking for investment. What, I don't know, tool, book, something that you've used would you recommend to somebody, again, following in your footsteps and maybe another academic founder? What's helped you get to the place you are now?
There are some books that I have read, but again, I don't take them as a Bible. I think it's always good to read. So, for example, Harvard Business Review, I do read quite often, but also from the MIT, the Disciplined Entrepreneurship, or I've also read The Lean Startup. These are great tools and something that gives you a sort of base. They do say that entrepreneurship cannot really be taught. I disagree with that, that you can be given the tools, because at the end of the day, you're not even taught how to be a doctor. You're given the tools to be a doctor. So it's the same kind of principle. But yeah, just don't take everything as set in stone, as a Bible that you have to follow. Just listen to other people's views, keep an open mind, research, travel if you can, and just learn how other people do business as well.
It's all
That's the
about the
main
people.
thing. Like, it's all about people at the end of the day. Like, companies are not formed by robots yet. We still have a couple of years until that, so make the most of it, I guess.
It's all about the people. It's all about learning. It's all about developing yourself so you can understand others, so you can lead others. Lovely,
Exactly.
lovely, lovely. So you're at a critical stage because I mean, I'm assuming that I'm assuming the biggest milestone this year is going to be raising the money. Maybe, or unless you've
Yes.
got another one under your hat that I don't know about yet.
No, that's going to be number one.
That's gonna be number one for investors, for potential partners, maybe future employees listening right now. What's your biggest challenge where our audience could help you?
Well, in terms of what people could help us with, other than obviously funding, which is number one, first and foremost, but spreading the voice, talking about something other than pharmacological treatments for neurological conditions, and sort of destigmatizing what people think. So I know that there's a lot of feelings about implantable devices in your brain and brain chips, and these people are trying to read my thoughts and steal my information, etc., etc. I don't think we're anywhere near there, unfortunately. But just don't think that everyone's out to get you and your data. There are people that are genuinely trying to help other people just improve their quality of life. So, let's just spread the word about these nice entrepreneurs that are just trying to make the world a better place and leave it just a tiny bit better than what they found when they were born.
Maria, the nice entrepreneur. I love it because absolutely right. Absolutely lovely and absolutely right.
Or at least I try to be. I won't always succeed, but I always try. I will always try.
Fantastic stuff. So, and then obviously investment. Then people are hearing about what you're doing, and they're hearing about this medical device that you're creating or you have created and are testing. So, again, for any investors coming on here, where can they follow your journey? Where can they learn more about Neurobite, and where can they get in touch with you?
They can find us on LinkedIn at Neurobite UK. We've also got our website, www.neurobite.co, where you can fill at the bottom of it a contact and inquiry form if you want to get in touch with us. And then if you want to send out a direct email, you can reach us at contact@neurobite.tech, TECH.
Fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, all of those contact details will be in the show notes. So you can get in touch with Maria and hopefully invest in her and create some better quality of life for people in the near future with her technology. Maria, it's been lovely having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Neil.
It's been lovely. Bye now.